Have you ever felt completely drained after helping someone? Like you absorbed their emotions so deeply, you walked away feeling worse than they did? Maybe you've been told you're too sensitive, or you find yourself constantly putting others' needs above your own, even when it leaves you exhausted or resentful. You might think it's just because you care deeply, and maybe that's true. But what if I told you that caring too much, empathizing too much, can actually become harmful, not just to you, but to your relationships, your mental health, and even your sense of identity? Empathy is often seen as an emotional superpower. But what happens when that power goes unchecked? What if the very thing that makes you a good friend, a loving partner, a supportive sibling, is the same thing quietly burning you out? Today, we're diving into a truth most people never talk about: the surprising dangers of too much empathy. And by the end of this video, you won't just understand why it happens. You'll learn how to protect your peace without losing your compassion. Now, let's go deep. Most people think of empathy as a purely positive trait. The more you care, the better, right? But empathy isn't just about feeling with others. It's also about absorbing. And that can come at a heavy cost, especially when empathy starts to blur the line between what's yours and what isn't. When someone you care about is hurting, your instinct may be to dive in emotionally, to feel what they feel, to shoulder their burden. But without emotional boundaries, this habit can lead to a pattern called emotional enmeshment, where your emotions get tangled up with theirs so deeply, you can no longer tell where they end and you begin. You stop checking in with your own emotions and start using other people's emotions as your compass. If they're upset, you're upset. If they're happy, you feel relief. Your mood depends on theirs. Your peace becomes conditional. This makes empathy feel less like a gift and more like a trap. And this trap doesn't just affect your emotions, it starts to shape your behavior. You might start people-pleasing to keep others comfortable. You overextend yourself to avoid guilt. You anticipate needs before they're spoken, because you've trained yourself to emotionally scan every room you walk into. You call it caring. But in reality, you're managing others' feelings so you don't have to feel the discomfort of their pain. This is what happens when empathy turns into emotional over-responsibility. And over time, that responsibility becomes weight. Heavy, unseen, but constant. You start to carry the weight of everyone around you. Friends, family, strangers on the internet. You absorb their stories, their traumas, their sadness, and internalize them as if they're your own. You don't just witness pain, you live it. And if you're not careful, it becomes your identity. But here's the problem. The human nervous system was not designed to process an infinite amount of pain. And when you're constantly immersed in emotional suffering, your brain and body start to pay the price. You become emotionally exhausted. You lose your sense of self. You may even develop symptoms of secondary trauma, things like anxiety, depression, fatigue, numbness, and difficulty sleeping. You're not broken. You're just overwhelmed. And no amount of willpower can fix that if you keep pouring from an empty cup. Now let's talk about something most people never connect with empathy: resentment. It may sound strange at first. How can something so warm and caring lead to such a bitter feeling? But when you give and give without boundaries, when you keep absorbing the pain of others without ever receiving the same care in return, something inside you shifts. That subtle frustration builds up like pressure in a sealed jar, and eventually it leaks out. You might find yourself suddenly irritable with the very people you were trying to help. You might become short, avoidant, or emotionally distant, not because you stopped caring, but because you've hit an invisible wall. This is the emotional cost of being overly empathetic: burnout, frustration, even anger. And the worst part? You might feel guilty for feeling this way. You judge yourself for pulling back. You tell yourself, I should be stronger. I shouldn't feel this way. They need me. But guilt is not a guide. It's a signal, a warning that your empathy has been pushed past its healthy limits. Resentment grows when you ignore your own needs in service of everyone else's. When you show up for others, but no one shows up for you. When you say yes to everyone else, but no to yourself. That's not compassion, that's codependency in disguise. Empathy without boundaries eventually turns into self-abandonment. And that's where the damage really starts. You stop checking in with yourself. You ignore your gut. You tolerate discomfort in silence. You pretend you're okay when you're not. And slowly, you disconnect from your own inner truth. That disconnect shows up in so many ways. You stop doing things that bring you joy. You avoid rest because you feel like you haven't earned it. You become emotionally numb or overly reactive. You might even develop physical symptoms: headaches, fatigue, chest tightness, because your body is absorbing emotional tension that was never meant to be yours in the first place. All of this leads to a crucial point. You can't truly help others if you've lost touch with yourself. Empathy that sacrifices your well-being isn't noble, it's unsustainable. Eventually it collapses. And often it takes your relationships, health, and mental peace down with it. But there's a way forward, a better, healthier path. And it begins with learning how to hold space for others without losing yourself in the process. Holding space means you can be present for someone's pain without needing to fix it. You listen without absorbing. You offer compassion without drowning in it. You validate without enabling. You help without hurting yourself. It's the difference between sitting beside someone in their storm and jumping into the ocean with no life jacket. This takes practice. It's not something most of us are taught. We're taught to be nice, to be giving, to always be there for others. But we're not often taught how to regulate, reflect, or replenish. Especially if you're naturally empathetic, this skill becomes critical. One helpful tool is something called empathic detachment. It's not coldness. It's not shutting off. It's emotional awareness with boundaries. It's saying, I care deeply, but I'm not responsible for fixing this. It's keeping your heart open without leaving the door unguarded. Empathic detachment helps you stay grounded. It lets you support someone in crisis without becoming their emotional sponge. It keeps you from spiraling into their chaos. It's how therapists, doctors, and social workers manage to show up every day without breaking down. And this is something anyone can learn. You don't need a degree to protect your peace. You just need self-awareness, a commitment to boundaries, and the courage to choose balance over burnout. Another danger of too much empathy lies in how it distorts our sense of self-worth. If your identity is wrapped up in being the helper, the fixer, the one who's always there, then you may start to feel unworthy unless you're constantly giving. You only feel valuable when you're sacrificing. Only feel important when someone else needs saving. But love isn't measured by how much of yourself you give away. And your worth isn't dependent on how much pain you can hold. True self-worth comes from recognizing that you matter, not because of what you do for others, but because of who you are. You don't need to suffer to be good. You don't need to overextend to prove your value. In fact, the healthiest, most impactful people are those who operate from a full cup. They care deeply, but they also protect their energy. They're not afraid to say no. They rest without guilt. They prioritize joy and boundaries, and that allows them to give from overflow, not from depletion. Empathy should energize, not exhaust. It should connect you to others, not disconnect you from yourself. And the moment you start to feel otherwise, it's time to recalibrate. Now let's address something a bit more hidden: how too much empathy can feed into emotional echo chambers. When we're overly empathetic, we often surround ourselves with people who feel things just as intensely. This creates a cycle where strong emotions are amplified rather than regulated. If someone is upset, we become upset. If they're overwhelmed, we mirror that. And in groups, this can spiral quickly into group anxiety, panic, or hopelessness. Empathy without perspective can become contagious. It spreads unchecked emotion. That's why in emotionally charged communities, whether online or in real life, things can escalate fast. There's no pause, no regulation. Just emotional echo bouncing back and forth, louder each time. To prevent this, we must become emotional anchors. That means slowing down, taking a breath, and choosing to respond rather than react. It means holding perspective even when emotions run high. It means saying, yes, this matters, but let's stay grounded. We need more people who bring calm to the chaos, who can empathize without fueling the fire, who can feel deeply and still think clearly. That's not weakness, it's emotional strength. And finally, perhaps the greatest danger of all, losing trust in yourself. When you're constantly prioritizing other people's emotions, you start to doubt your own. You question your instincts. You silence your voice. You look outward for validation instead of inward for truth. And little by little, you forget how to stand on your own emotional feet. You become so used to tuning into others that you forget what your own feelings even sound like. You second-guess yourself. You rely on other people to tell you what's right, what's fair, what's good. And that makes you vulnerable, not just to manipulation, but to deep self-alienation. True empathy doesn't silence your voice. It strengthens it. It doesn't disconnect you from your truth. It helps you hold both your truth and someone else's with care. That's the balance. That's the goal. So if you've ever felt like your empathy is draining you, if you've ever felt like caring too much is hurting you, know that you're not broken. You're not weak. You're not wrong. You're just overflowing. And it's time to create a container that protects your heart without hardening it. One that honors your deep care without sacrificing your inner peace. That starts with small, courageous steps. Say no without apology. Check in with yourself as often as you check in with others. Protect your joy like it's sacred, because it is. Remember that you're not responsible for other people's healing. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to recharge. You are allowed to be whole even when others are hurting. And you are allowed to care without carrying. The world needs empathy, but it needs healthy empathy. Grounded empathy. Empathy with boundaries and wisdom. Empathy that doesn't just feel, it transforms. And that kind of empathy? That's where healing truly begins. So the next time you feel like you're being pulled into someone else's emotional world, pause. Breathe. Ask yourself, am I helping, or am I hurting myself trying to help? Because the most powerful thing you can do for others is take care of you. If this video helped you see empathy in a new light, take a second to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who gives too much. We need more emotionally strong people in the world. People who care deeply and still protect their peace. You deserve to be one of them. Until next time, take care of yourself, and thank you for watching.